Hello you guys, and welcome to today's video. Please excuse how I look. I'm still trying to figure out the whole juggling a newborn and the twins, which they are out of the house now with their grandma, and my mom has left today, so it's like my first official day alone, even though the boys are out with their grandma. But I had just enough time to try and do something with my hair. I feel like I still look so crazy. Did not have any time to put makeup on. Little girl has been pretty unsettled this morning since she woke up for her like 9-something feed. I cannot get her to stay asleep laying down by herself, so I am going to hold her for this video. I'm trying to see like what angle looks the best. I think maybe that one looks a little bit better than the first one. But today's video is going to be my labor and delivery story time for you guys. I did go ahead and vlog the experience, and that video is already up on my channel, so if you guys missed that, I will link it up here for you guys. But I feel like a vlog can only capture so much, especially when I really didn't jump on the camera too much to explain how I was feeling in the moment, and some things just happened so fast that I did not have time to pick the camera up and explain what was going on. So in today's video, I'm going to look back at my labor and delivery, recount it from the perspective now being almost 2 weeks postpartum, and tell you guys the story of how little Miss Lily B came into the world. So I have a feeling today's video is going to be a little bit on the longer side and a little bit more chatty, so we're just going to jump right into it. Okay, so if you guys are familiar with the end of my pregnancy with Babygirl, I did go in for a scheduled induction with her, and I was actually scheduled to be induced on May 31st. And I really was hoping to have a May baby because the flower of the month of May is a lily, and I thought that that would have just been so, like, tie in with her name, so nice. I really wanted a May baby in the moment, but I feel like everything works out the way it's supposed to, and I love her birthday, which it is June 2nd, 6/2/24, which is a nice even number, and the boy's birthday is 1/20/2020, and I love their birthday, so I feel like everything just works out the way it's supposed to. So on the 31st, I was supposed to go in super early in the morning. I got the call Thursday evening, the day before, that they were not going to be able to take me because there weren't any beds. They didn't think there would be any beds in that morning for me to come in, so they told me to come in on the 1st, and then I waited around all day the 1st. I was supposed to go in at like 6 p.m. that night, and they called me around 4 and told me that they probably weren't gonna have a bed for me, and to plan to come in Sunday morning. And so Sunday morning I was super antsy. I woke up, I took a shower, I blow dried my hair. I called them at 6:45 right before shift change. I knew that they were going to call me around shift change, but I was so antsy to know whether I was going to be going in or not. And I knew the second that I got the call, I wanted to be prepared to head right into the hospital before they could change their minds and tell me that there weren't any beds available. So I called them at 6:45, and they told me to come in at shift change around 8. And so at that point, I was getting the boys up for the day. I told my mom, like, take a shower, get yourself ready. At 8 o'clock, we are going to head over to the hospital. And our plan was kind of similar to the plan that I had when delivering the boys, and that was to have my mom laboring with me for the majority of my stay, and then have Harris come in either at the second shift or for pushing, which we will get into that in a little bit. And with the boys, I did go in at night. I went in around 6 p.m. and my mom wound up laboring with me through the night, and then around 6 a.m. Harris came, and I progressed shortly thereafter and had the boys around like 11:30, I think. So we knew since I was being induced, there was a chance that I was going to have a bit of a longer labor, and so we planned for my mom to stay with me the majority of the day, and then Harris was going to come to me either that night or early the next morning, depending on how things were looking. I knew my body was going to most likely take to the induction pretty well since I was loosely induced with the boys. I had to have Cervidil inserted, and that actually did the job with the boys. I did not have to have Pitocin. And so I knew my body most likely was going to take pretty well to the induction, but at the same time, I really didn't know what to expect or how long my labor was going to be with her. Because I wasn't really dilated anything at my 38-week appointment, was not effaced at all. She was still super high. So we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. But at 8 a.m., I said goodbye to the boys. My mom and I loaded up the car, and we headed over to the hospital, which thankfully is super close to my house. So we did that like short little drive over there, and they took us right up to labor and delivery and got us all settled in, and it was so weird. This was the same hospital that I delivered the boys at, and I did not remember labor and delivery looking like that. The room that I was in definitely was very familiar. It looked like the room that I remember being in and laboring in with the boys, but actually going up into labor and delivery, I don't remember it looking like that. I don't remember the hallway looking like that. It was so weird to be back there because I didn't really remember any of it with the boys, but it was super quiet on the floor that morning. They took me right into a room and did all that like normal intake stuff. Asked me about like my history, my pregnancy, my past pregnancy, past labor and deliveries, and we kind of set up a game plan for what we were going to do for my labor and delivery. I did say that if Cervidil was an option, which it is a vaginal medication, you can take it orally or have it inserted vaginally. I think this time around they said that they were going to use Cytotec, which is almost like the same thing. Cytotec is just a pill, Cervidil is like a string. They said if I was a candidate for that after I got checked, that we could go that route again. But the first thing that the nurse brought up to me that she wanted me to do, which I don't know if it was a little white lie on her part, but she wanted me to do an enema. She said that an enema is a natural, holistic, homeopathic way of possibly sending your body into labor. That the clearing of your bowels can trigger contractions, which I guess it's almost like the same thing as drinking castor oil. People drink that in like a midwife's brew to try and get labor started because the emptying of your bowels and the cramps that it can give you can put you into labor. So she brought up this whole enema thing, and I honestly feel like it was a ploy to get me to just clear my bowels for the doctor's sake so that I wouldn't have a bowel movement during labor. But it was something that they offered, and I thought to myself, you know what, might as well try it. So after I was checked the first time, I was 1.5 centimeters dilated. I was 70% effaced, but Babygirl was at a -3 station, which is super high up in my pelvis. We decided to start me with the enema. They did have me on the contraction monitors, and they were saying that I was having semi-decent and consistent contractions, which to me, they just were Braxton Hicks, which was an issue that I felt like I was going to run into in my pregnancy, not knowing the difference between Braxton Hicks contractions and true contractions, because I couldn't remember what a true contraction felt like in my labor with the boys. So they did have me on the contraction monitor, and they did say I was contracting semi-consistently. So they felt that starting with the enema, we would see if these contractions would either increase or slow down. They would get me on IV fluids to see if the contractions would either increase or slow down. And then from there, we would decide whether we were going to do the Cytotec or the Pitocin. So I did that. Oh, sorry guys. I did that enema, which I'm just going to say was the worst part of my entire labor and delivery. It was not fun at all. It was gigantic. It was very painful, not the process of the enema going in, but the process of everything coming out. It made me feel so sick, and I ate that morning because I didn't know when I'd be able to eat again in my labor and delivery process. So I ate an egg sandwich that morning, and it just made me feel so sick and disgusting. But we got that out of the way. I got back in the bed. We monitored my contractions for a little bit, and I would say around 11 a.m., we decided that Cervidil or Cytotec probably wasn't going to be the best route of induction for me, just because I was already a little bit dilated and already having consistent contractions. Those contractions really weren't letting up, and they weren't anything painful. Like I said, I didn't even really know that I was having them, but they were being picked up on the monitor, and they were semi-consistent. So they felt that the Cytotec was kind of redundant and really wasn't going to do much. It really was going to be placed to soften my cervix and get it ready to dilate. But because I was already having contractions, we decided to just hook me up to some Pitocin and get going on that. So we got to the hospital around 8. All of that intake and all of that stuff took about 2 hours. And then around 11, or I guess 3 hours, around 11, they finally came in and got me hooked up to the Pitocin, and they really started super slow, the increments that they were increasing me at. We were going up by 2, which I don't even know what that means, but 2 units every single time. about every 30 minutes or so, I would say. And I was on that slow increase for a few hours. And again, I was having contractions, not anything that was super painful, not anything that was really registering to me as uncomfortable, but they were being pretty consistent. So I'm trying to think. They had me on the Pitocin. I was chilling in the bed. My mom and I were watching some IDTV, some murder mysteries. We watched that Aaron Carter documentary. I forget what it was called. It was pretty good, pretty entertaining. And I felt like things were moving along, but at a pretty slow pace. So around 2 p.m., I was starving at this point. When I went into my labor with the boys, I went in not knowing if my water had actually broke. And it was quite some time since I'd eaten that day. And I think maybe that's why at some point they told me, like, if you're gonna eat now. This time around, they didn't say that to me. I really wish my mom didn't ask if I could eat, because I think if she didn't ask, we could have gotten away with sneaking food. But around like 2-3 o'clock, my mom was hungry and was going to order herself some food. They told me that because I was on the Pitocin and the induction had started, that I wasn't allowed to eat anything. But they did come in and check me around 2-3 o'clock, somewhere in that range. And I had only dilated to a 2. I was still about 70% effaced, but Babygirl was slowly moving down. They asked me if I wanted to have my water broken, and quite honestly, I really didn't have an issue with all of the interventions that they were doing. I know a lot of people call it like the cascade of interventions, that once they start one thing, they're going to keep going along and doing X, Y, and Z to get you to go into labor. And personally, I knew my body and I knew it was going to go one way or the other, whether I was going to progress on my own or if I was going to need all of these interventions. And with the boys, I was so go with the flow with my labor. I didn't even have a birth plan with them, and everything wound up working out really well with them. I had a pretty picture perfect labor and delivery, and that set me up for my expectations for this labor and delivery. So even though I did have a birth plan and there were certain interventions that I did not want to experience, other interventions like cervical checks and having my water broken and Pitocin and all those things, I was pretty okay with experiencing. And so when they were already up in there doing the cervical check and she asked me if I wanted to have my water broken to see if it was going to help Babygirl move down a little bit more, I opted to have it done. It was extremely painful. She told my cervix was tilted backwards, so they had to kind of pull it forward and then break my water. And originally they didn't think that they broke it, but when she pulled out the little tool in her hand and I adjusted my seat, my water then did break. And what I didn't know is that your water continuously trickles out of you until you give birth. I knew with the boys, I had walked around all day not knowing if my water had broken. So yes, it was going to be trickling out throughout the day, but I thought once they broke your water and that gush happens, that your body ran out of amniotic fluid, and that is not the case at all. It continues to be produced by your baby throughout your labor, and it continues to come out. And that was a little bit uncomfortable because it just felt like I was continuously peeing myself. And because I could get up and move around if I wanted, but I didn't want my amniotic fluid just like running down my leg. I was basically sitting in a puddle in my bed as my amniotic fluid continued to come out. But after doing that, I definitely felt like contractions were getting a little bit stronger. I was still having them. They were still being picked up on the monitor. And I felt without that cushion of having my water, my sac, what's the word I'm looking for? Having that amniotic sac like hole and having that cushion there, I definitely started to feel contractions more so than I did before. Still nothing extremely painful, but I was well aware of them and more aware of them than I was before I got my water broken. And that was between 2 and 3 o'clock. And so a little while after that, they did say that the anesthesiologist was on floor placing an epidural in 2 rooms over, and that if I wanted to get my epidural, it was a good idea to put the order in now since he was already here, and we didn't want me requesting it too late and being in too much pain. And again, with the boys, I got my epidural around 4 centimeters, and I really wasn't in that much pain then, but they did tell me you should get it now just in case you progress quickly. And because I had to deliver in an operating room with the boys, I needed some sort of numbing agent just in case I needed to have an emergency C-section in the case that baby B didn't come down in the right position. And if you guys remember my labor and delivery story from them, I had an adverse reaction to my epidural and I was extremely nervous to get it, but I knew I wanted it. I knew going into this labor that there was a potential that I would want to go natural without the epidural, but it felt right in that moment to get the epidural. And let me tell you, I am so glad I listened to my intuition and got that epidural, because what you're about to hear from my labor and delivery and what I experienced, I don't know how I would have been able to do it without the epidural. So I think it was my intuition speaking when she came in and asked me, you know, if you're gonna want it, let's put the order in now. And I said okay to it. I feel like that was my intuition speaking. And I'm so glad I agreed to it in that moment. And the experience this time getting my epidural was nothing like the experience that I had with the boys. So the anesthesiologist this time around, I remember when I had the boys, it was, oh, I'm running out of water. It was like an older man. Not that he was rude or off-putting or anything, but I had a younger anesthesiologist this time around, and the nurses were actually raving about him and said that he's really, really good at what he does. And when I tell you he was really, really good at what he does, it took him about 3 minutes, maybe even less, to place this epidural. It did not hurt anywhere near as bad as it hurt the first time around. Obviously, it hurts a little bit when they put the numbing agent in and it kind of burns and it's a little uncomfortable. But he was so like gentle and sweet and reassuring. My nurse at the time, her name was April, she was amazing. Everything in the room just felt so right. And he did a great job at placing that epidural, and it definitely took my anxiety away with the whole epidural experience and has shifted my whole thought process on the epidural. And I just had a really positive experience with it being placed, and I'm so glad that I had it placed. So I went ahead and got the epidural. I would think around like 3:30, sometime around then. I know it was after they broke my water and it was after 2 p.m., but the timing is a little bit hazy. But I did get my epidural placed. And after that, I got comfortable in the bed. They put the catheter in, they put the peanut pole in between my legs. I basically did everything I did when I was in labor with the boys. After I got my epidural with the boys, I think I got it around like 6, 7 a.m. Maybe around 8 a.m. It was sometime that morning that I got it placed, and then Harris and I wound up taking a nap, and I took a nap with the peanut ball placed in between my legs, and then I woke up and was ready to push. Basically the same thing this time around. Got the epidural placed, got comfortable in the bed, put the peanut ball in between my legs, and my mom and I kind of just hung out and watched TV for the remainder of this time. Now, they didn't come and check me again until 8 p.m. So there was quite a time jump in between when I was checked around 2, 3 o'clock and was 2 centimeters dilated, and the next time that I was checked. But during this time, they were upping my Pitocin, still at increments of 2 every 15 to 30 minutes until I got pretty high up in the numbers. I think it was around like 10 units of Pitocin that they came in and checked me again. And again, I was having consistent contractions at this point, nothing that I could really feel because I had the epidural. But they did come and check me around shift change, which I believe was about 8:15. It was like 8:11 maybe that I texted Harris that I was only a 4 centimeters. I was, I think maybe 100% effaced at that point, but Babygirl was still pretty high. I think she was still like a -2 station. So she really wasn't down in my pelvis too much more. And between, 2 and 8, 6 hours had gone by and I had only progressed 2 centimeters. At this point, Harris was kind of asking me for an update on whether he should go to bed for the night or if he should switch with my mom and do those like shifts that we were going to do. And I realistically, honestly thought that I was going to labor through until the early hours of the morning, that I told him, get some sleep, leave your ringer on, leave your phone on. I will call you the next time I got checked. I believed I was going to get checked in a few hours from then and I'd be like a 7 or an 8 and I can say, okay, come in now. I should be progressing to a 10 shortly. Let's be prepared and have you here. But when I tell you there was such a turn of events in just 45 minutes to an hour, everything flipped on a dime with me and it got crazy in that room. So at 8:11, I texted Harris that I had rolled over to a different side and was going to try and get some sleep, but something was telling me that something was not right. I felt like I could feel my contractions through the epidural, and I remember when I was in my labor with the boys, How I knew I was 10 centimeters was because I woke up from a nap and could feel my contractions through my epidural. So something just wasn't right, and I kept telling my mom, I don't understand why I can feel these contractions through my epidural if I'm only 4 centimeters dilated. Like, it's not making any sense why it's so painful with the epidural. And I think my Pitocin was maybe up to like a 12 or 14 at that point. I thought a 10 was the highest it can go based on a Google search, but I was corrected because I looked over at my little Pitocin machine and I was at, I believe, like a 14. And I was like, for some reason, I can feel these contractions through my epidural. Like, this is so painful. And I was texting my friend Catherine at the time. I was talking with my mom about it. And my mom was like, maybe you should just call the anesthesiologist. Maybe there's something that they can give you in your epidural that's more constant, because I did have a button that I was able to push, but it was basically timed. I think I couldn't push it more than once in like a 15-minute period. And in the beginning, when I got my epidural, I pushed it maybe 1 to 3 times. When we hit that 8 p.m. mark and I felt like I could feel it a lot more so than I should for only being 4 centimeters, I was pressing the button as often as I could, and sometimes I was getting locked out of it. Like, it would beep and ding and show a green light if you could get the bump of epidural, and then it would show a red light that nothing could be administered if it was too soon within a time frame. And I found myself pressing it a few times and the button flashing red, so I knew that I was feeling a lot more pain, but I couldn't get the relief that I needed with the button because I was getting locked out of it. So my mom told me to call the anesthesiologist, so I did, and they did come in and they did put something in my epidural, and he told me that it should work within 3 contractions. So I rolled over, I closed my eyes, and I counted my contractions. 3 contractions go by. My 4th contraction, it was a little bit lighter. I was like, wow, okay, maybe this is doing something. The next contraction that I got, I sat up straight in the bed to the best of my ability, and I said, oh my God, I can feel it in my butt. And if you've ever given birth, that is like the telltale sign that you're ready to push, is the pressure in your butt. And within 30 seconds of me having that contraction, I had started to get full body shakes and shivers, which is another thing you get when you're like 10 centimeters dilated and your body is ready to push. For some reason, you get like the shakes and the shivers, and it's kind of uncontrollable. The contractions immediately were so painful, even with the epidural, even with me clicking the button, and even with the anesthesiologist putting something into my epidural to kind of try and take more of the pain away. They were so close together, about 30 seconds apart. They weren't lasting too long. I could tell that what I was feeling was probably the peak of the contraction and the rest of it was being dulled by the epidural. But they were so painful, my whole body was shaking, and in sitting up to tell my mom that I could feel the pressure in my butt, a huge gush of something came out of me, and it was like I immediately felt her slip down into place. And so I called the nurse, they came in, they ripped the blanket off of my lower half, and they told me a bunch of my bloody show had come out, which is basically like your amniotic fluid mixed with blood. And she checked me, and I was 9.5 centimeters, 100% of face, and Babygirl was +2 station, which means she had moved all the way down. You start at like a -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then the baby's out. And she was a +2, and I was 9.5 centimeters. I checked my phone, it was 9:25. So from 8:11 to 9:25, I went from 4 centimeters to 9.5 centimeters. She went from like a -2 to a +2, and I was ready to push. And this gave me so much anxiety because I had told Harris to go to bed. I did not think that I was going to give birth until the wee hours of the morning with how slow my labor was progressing in the beginning. So I immediately started to cry. I was so terrified that Harris was not going to be able to make it because we had to wait for his parents to drive from their house to our house so his dad could stay here with the boys who were sleeping, and then for him and his mom to get in the car and come to the hospital. So at this point, they said, you know, we still need to call your doctor. Don't freak out too much. Try and calm your body down. Breathe through the contractions. The nurse hit the button on my epidural one more time and said, let's try and get you as much relief as we can before we start pushing. And it took about 20-ish minutes for my doctor to show up. He came in the room. I told him, the baby's father is not even here yet. Harris is not even here yet. I don't want to start pushing yet. I don't want to do practice pushes because I can feel her in there. And I know at some point your body will just expel the baby. It's called like the fetal ejection reflex. And so I was trying to calm my body down as much as I could because I honestly felt my body pushing her down on its own, that I started to get anxiety that I was not going to be able to control keeping her in there. I didn't want to do practice pushes. I didn't want to progress her anything. So the doctor said, okay, I'm going to, go back out. I come to find out he was like pacing in the hallway waiting. He said, I'm gonna go back out. I'll be back in a few minutes. Try and relax your body. Don't push, don't bear down, nothing like that. Just try and relax and keep the baby in there. And so I was getting these super consistent, painful contractions, the pressure. I could feel her in there. I was so stressed out. We were calling Harris, texting Harris, trying to get updates from him on when he was going to be at the hospital. And at like 10:24, so almost basically an hour from when I was told that I was 9.5 centimeters to when Harris and his mom got to the hospital. Harris's mom had texted me saying that they were waiting for an escort to come get them. Come to find out that they went to every single entrance at the hospital, and because it was a Sunday and because it was after hours, there was no one there to let them into the hospital. They were ringing every intercom bell that they could. They went to the emergency room, they went to the main entrance, every single entrance that they could try and get to in this hospital they were going to. Come to find out they had to wait. They were running around. They finally got an escort to come, and at 10:24, his mom texted me telling me that they were coming up to the room. So at this point, the doctor was back in the room because I was hooting and hollering and screaming and having a hard time holding her in and not pushing. They decided to prep me and get everything ready so that the second that Harris walked in the room, I could do my first push. So they got my legs in the stirrups, they got all the gear ready for the baby. It was so weird delivering this time around because when I had the boys, I didn't deliver in the labor and delivery room. I was wheeled to the operating room and had to have them in there. God forbid I had to have an emergency C-section for baby B, like I said. It was so weird that like, it was one nurse, a resident, and the doctor, and that was it that was in the room. It was a lot calmer than when I had the boys, and it really felt so weird that it was like, okay, I'm just going to push in this bed. But they got me in the stirrups, they got me all ready. It was so funny because it was actually the resident's birthday on that day, and so she asked if she could help deliver baby girl, and I said of course you could. So her and the doctor were at the bottom of my bed. I had a nurse next to me. It was also her birthday sometime in June. My doctor's birthday was June 7th. My mom's birthday was June 5th. We had a lot of Geminis in the room. It kind of worked out, like I said, exactly how it was supposed to work out. I thought it was very fitting and funny that everybody in that room had a June birthday and the resident's birthday was that day. But at like 10:30, Harris and his mom come running into the room. The doctor said, go stand over there, get up by your head, let's get this going. And with my next contraction, I started pushing. Poor Harris almost passed out, which I feel like that always happens with the dads. Harris has a very queasy and weak stomach. He tried to stay by my head. He tried to look down at what was happening with baby girl, and then he was out for the count and basically had to sit. I had my eyes closed for a majority of the time just because I was trying to focus and bear down and push. But my mom and Harris's mom took turns like consoling me up at the top. I could hear Harris from where he was sitting in a chair over to my side, encouraging me and consoling me. And so come to find out, I only pushed for 15 minutes. Baby girl was born at 10:45 exactly. It felt like I was pushing for a lifetime because baby girl not only was almost 9 pounds, she was sunny side up, which means she was looking up at the ceiling, and when you deliver a baby, they're supposed to be looking down at the floor, and then they will twist and turn naturally as they come out of your canal. Baby girl was sunny side up and almost 9 pounds. So there was a lot of difficulty in getting her out. I have heard and seen stories of where women's tailbones break, their pelvises break. They need to have episiotomies, all of these things that happen because their babies are sunny side up. And I almost needed an episiotomy. I heard my mom whisper to Jane that he was getting a scalpel ready, and I was so scared that that was going to be the case. So I really started to hone in and focus and push to the best of my ability at that point so that I could avoid the episiotomy. And with the way that baby girl was coming down, I'm going to give you guys, there's a bug in my window if you guys are wondering what I keep looking at. There is a wasp flying in my window and I'm so nervous it's going to get into my house. But I'm going to be very real and raw and honest right now, and these are the things that they don't tell you about in labor and delivery. But the resident literally had to put her fingers up my backside to help scoop the back of baby girl's head out from my tailbone and from like my rectum area, I guess. I don't know. She was caught and stuck on something. And so they had to put their fingers in my backside to create counter pressure to help lift her up and out of that and back through the vaginal canal. And after she did that, which I could feel it, it was pretty painful. After she did that, like 2 more pushes later, baby girl did come out and the relief was almost instant. It felt so good to finally get her out. And so I delivered baby girl sunny side up at 8 pounds and 11 ounces on June 2nd at 10:45 p.m. and Harris almost missed it. We were so close. The doctor was like, if you cannot hold it anymore, we are going to have to start pushing without him being here. And he will come in and maybe baby girl will still be coming out or she will be out, but you cannot keep putting yourself through this. And at some point your body is just going to want her out. Thankfully, Harris was able to make it. Harris's mom was able to make it. My mom was able to be there. Everything wound up being picture perfect. And honestly, for her being sunny side up and an 8 pound, 11 ounce baby, only pushing for about 20 minutes really wasn't that bad. It was probably even less than that at that point. And baby girl was born and she was placed on my chest. I was able to do the hour of skin to skin that I wanted to. She latched within 2 minutes of being out. I think we did delayed cord clamping. It was like kind of chaotic and crazy at that point, and I really don't remember when cord was cut. I do remember delivering the placenta. That's like the best feeling ever. It's like a big relief once that comes out. And then my doctor cleaned me up. I did have to get a few stitches. I did have a few hemorrhoids. Again, the things that no one really talks about labor and delivery. Did get a few hemorrhoids, did get a few stitches. And unfortunately, the same thing happened that happened with the boys. I was not able to go to the bathroom. I wasn't able to pee after labor, and this did happen with the boys. And I did get an initial catheter with them in the labor and delivery room. And then once I made it to mother and baby, I didn't need another one, but I did get a catheter in the mother and baby room, no, in the labor and delivery room. And then when I also got to mother and baby about an hour or so later, I still couldn't go to the bathroom. And I had to get another catheter in that they left in me for like 24 hours just to make sure that my bladder was emptying and to kind of reduce the swelling, because since baby girl came out sunny side up, she was not only putting a lot of pressure low, but putting a lot of pressure higher up as well. And my urethra was really swollen. So that's why I couldn't go to the bathroom. But all in all, from start of the medication at around 11 a.m. to delivering her at 10:45 p.m., it was about a 12-hour labor, which is very comparable to the labor that I had with the boys. I got there at 6 p.m. and started meds around 8 p.m., I would say, and I had the boys between 11 and 12 o'clock the following morning. So both my labors, for being semi-induced the first time and induced the second time, my body took to it really well, and I honestly would have to say I had overall a positive experience. Obviously, there were the few caveats, the enema, the sunny side up baby, the counter pressure that the resident had to do. There were definitely some things that were not pleasant, but nothing detrimental happened to me, detrimental happened to baby. There weren't any, adverse risks or adverse things that happened. I didn't experience any interventions that I didn't want to happen, no forceps, no episiotomy, thankfully, no emergency C-section. So all in all, it was a very positive induction experience, and I would do it again wholeheartedly 10 times over. I would have another baby. Honestly, 3 days into having her, I was like, I would so have another. Like, I enjoyed that experience so much, and I would do it all over again. Who knows if we'll be able to suck another baby out of Harris. I don't think I'll be able to, but this time around, having just one baby, even he says it is so different and so easy. But that is my labor and delivery with baby girl. So I know I want to film a postpartum update for you guys, and I'm sure there are some questions out there after I post this video about my labor and delivery. So I think I'm going to film like a Q&A, and I'll do a combo Q&A of like labor and delivery questions plus like the first few weeks postpartum. So if you have any questions for me regarding labor, delivery, the first few days in the hospital, the first few weeks postpartum, my healing journey, having a newborn, anything like that, please leave your questions in the comment section down below. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing from me recount my labor and delivery with my baby girl. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and with that being said, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.